Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Hello, business builder. As always, it is an honor to have your ears and for you to have chosen this podcast, Unemployed and Afraid, as your inspiration, sidekick, connection point on all things small business building. And in particular, in this part 3 of our first ever mini-series, where I'm bringing you a personal insight into the building of an online course. My online course, in case maybe you've thought about doing one yourself. And don't worry if you haven't yet listened to part 1 and 2. I'm going to give you a little bit of a recap so that you can just enjoy this episode no matter where you are joining me in the process, as I'm going to drop some insights into what's going on for me that I'm really hoping are going to help give you a bit of extra support, inspiration, and information that will help you get there if this is something that is on your to-do, potential idea, opportunity, revenue generating idea that's on your list. And I'm doing this with the legends at Squarespace, who have developed this super cool integration that makes the technical side of this super easy. But as you know, I love the feel. So I'm here to talk about what's going on and exactly how I'm going through this process. So in the first episode of this mini-series, I shared with you what I'm creating. So an online course that teaches small businesses and brands how to create a big podcast concept, as my zone of genius, well, one, aren't we all just multifaceted humans, is in creating podcasts for brands. It's a skill I've refined over 15 years of working in commercial audio media, and now with the added perspective of being a passionate podcast creator myself and a small business builder. In my course, I'll be sharing the full podcast landscape, all my best tips on how to create the right idea and content structure for said big podcast, and get small businesses ready to hit record on something they'll love and that'll work really hard for their business. And I'm attempting to put together all my years of knowledge and the general insights of my brain, which is something I also consult and hold workshops on, into this course. And it's been a bit of a scary reveal and honestly an even scarier process, like quite unsettling. In the last episode, I shared with you my chat with the incredible Tess Caniglio of Digital Moves, who is also a Squarespace Circle member. So she really gets both the digital landscape generally and the platform that I'm going to be using. But we didn't get into too many technical details in that episode. It's more kind of the top line that you need to know where you're getting in. So do go back and give this one a listen, because she gives so much great context on general course creation and thinking about the process before you jump in to the platform and all of the great things that it can do for you, and covering how to approach developing the content for it and what works well in that space. Just super helpful stuff that I learned a lot from. And I actually needed a few days after that chat to integrate what I learned with where I was at myself. And can I just say that documenting this process into a mini-series has not reduced the complexity of creating an online course in any way, but lol, we love a challenge, right? In this episode, which is part 3, I'm sharing with you the next steps that I've been taking since and what's been shifting as the work has absolutely started. If I could insert the audio version of the eek emoji face here, I absolutely would. But I'm going to share with you this update in 3 sections. So the first part is prep, the second is content, and the third is learning. So all shared with you in the hope that it helps you with your own process if and when you take this plunge. So let's get right into part 1, the prep. I want to start with an overarching realization I've had, that developing an online course based on what you know and what you do puts your shit, all your shit, and all the stuff that holds you back smack bang into the spotlight. Like imposter syndrome, absolutely rife. Doubting thoughts, absolutely rife in this. Because it really feels like there's no hiding behind a brand or a product. It's like you and your knowledge, or me and my knowledge. And there's something about putting that work out into the world for people to accept or reject that is just deeply challenging. Also, analysis paralysis is a real thing. I have watched and read so many social media headlines and videos about what to and what not to do, and I was finding myself super overwhelmed. It's all the, "Hey, this is how you should do this," and 10 steps to make a sellout online course, like shouty content that gets me shook. And the big kind of over profiling of what an online course can do for you and how it can change your life, it almost makes it feel too big. And it is an amazing opportunity and a really great thinking exercise. And, it can lead to a lot of things in and of itself and beyond. And, that's really why I wanted to make this mini series for you, because all of that can be really overwhelming and can detract you from what could be really fantastic through the process. And also because there is literally no perfect or correct opinion or way to do this, regardless of what said shouty content tells you. I really just want to encourage you and myself to take what resonates for you and put the rest down. Leave it. There becomes a point where you have to trust your instincts. Just try. Just that whole action creates information thing where you just do one step, then another step and another, and trust your instincts and give it a little bit of time. Okay, so bringing it back. As you know, I'm building my course on Squarespace, as the courses section is a Squarespace digital product that I can integrate directly into my website. So I'm really not worried about creating on the platform itself. I watched a super clear webinar on the Squarespace Resource Center on this and feel comfortable that I'm going to be able to navigate that when the time comes. I've got a very vague idea of kind of how it works, what it might look like. It's not that. The thing with my site, my website, actually is that I am, or was, as of right now recording this podcast for you, also in the process of redeveloping my actual website. And so I was trying to wrap my head around where the Squarespace courses integration would fit at the same time as figuring out my current website. So I had to step right away from all of the content, all of the thinking, all of the platform thinking, and first just make sure I had a completed base website that I felt confident and happy with. Now, here is a pivot complexity that I wanted to throw in for good measure, apparently. Good Side of the Bed, which is my website, goodsideofthebed.com.au, and where this course will be sitting, has always been my brand, as in it's me. The two are not separate. I created this name of Good Side of the Bed in 2014, and it was a recipe blog then, a vegan recipe blog, which I think I've said it before, I really wish I had stuck with, because 2014 was like organic growth gold mine. I didn't. I stepped away from it when my corporate media work took over my life, and only made my way back to the name or the persona of Good Side of the Bed when I left corporate media. And it then became the brand that I taught yoga under and the brand of my ceramics, which were naturally made by me. So in some ways, because of the ceramics in particular, Good Side of the Bed as a name became a brand separate from me as Kim Curtin. You could pick up my pieces in Wow Song Shack or Sabi and turn them over to see the maker's stamp and not know that Good Side of the Bed is also Kim Curtin. And so as my website was almost entirely dedicated to my ceramics as well as my delicious plant-based recipes, I had some brand unpicking to do to bring it back to me. If you've been following my story for a little while, you'll know that I stopped producing ceramics for consumers around March of this year, which is 2023, so that I could dedicate myself to this podcast and to my consulting work in podcasting, which is something I've never actually advertised anywhere that I do, in the consulting, or shared much information on. Plus, as a side note, I was moving interstate and was not down to move an entire ceramic studio in which everything weighs 1,000,000 kilos. It's not that I'll never do them again. I just won't be doing large productions. And my focus had shifted to this wonderful podcast and you, wonderful listener, creating more content for you and really just immersing myself into this podcast space, which is something I absolutely love. It was kind of a measure of coming back to myself after leaving corporate media and re-embracing that side of my knowledge and that side of my passion. So before I could even think about creating my online course in branded podcasts, I had to reclaim my brand name or my alias and express what I do in podcasting, making it clear externally to other people that that's what I do through a wholesale redevelopment of my website. See what I mean? Total pivot complexity. So now that you know all of that, and I could do another whole episode about the challenge of building website content that's all about you and yourself, because it is awkward as hell selling yourself in any circumstance, but it is a necessary evil. And as a smart woman once said to me, it is not gross to promote yourself. In short, how I tackled it is I redeveloped my logo so that it was clear that Kim Curtin and Good Side of the Bed are connected, are the same. I mapped a very loose site structure. I started writing my About Me content for the 800th time. I gathered testimonials and work accolade from over the years from some amazing people I've worked with for some good old-fashioned social proof on what I do, and I just got it done. I rebuilt my website in what was probably a solid 5 days of work, but spread out over like 10 because I had to fit it in and around other things, but I did get it done. And honestly, thank God for the Squarespace functionality, being so user-friendly and like moving sections around and dropping in text and images, changing site colors, because like that part is actually fun to me. It's the planning part that's not fun. And it was when I got to developing the homepage of this website that it dawned on me that if I'm in market promoting my course on developing branded podcast concepts, I realized that I need to sell that on the homepage. And it's not easy to do that when I haven't actually developed the course content yet either. So quite complex. But what I've realized through the thinking that's been taking place throughout this process is that I'm creating a course on something that any brand creating a podcast needs. But these same humans may not realize that a quote unquote branded podcast is what they're actually creating, as it's kind of an industry term, I guess. So I had to do some top line education on that, which got me thinking about all of the education content I'm going to need to do in the future, but I'm just taking one step at a time. So I realized that the simplest way to do that was to write and record a short piece to camera for the homepage that essentially covers what is a branded podcast? It answers that question. And well, there went another whole day of my life of figuring out how to use a teleprompter. I cannot believe I've never done that before. And change a background in post-editing because my background in my new office is pretty ugly. So thank God for the insane developments in AI editing tools that are just making life so much easier. So only after all that, now that I have the right base in which to build my course content on and my external profile really at this stage of my business evolution, am I actually now at the stage of rethinking about getting my course content written and recorded as it would be. So that takes me into the second part of this episode and the second part of sharing these learnings with you, content of my course. I've been challenged by two things. One is a big question about whether my course should be on demand and self-paced, or should it have a live element, meaning that it's set to run on a fixed timeline and have live elements with me. This is something I can't solve right now. It's one I actually have decided to park until further along the content development journey, as I felt like it was making me feel really hamstrung, like I couldn't make any decisions until I had parked that. So for now, I'm playing on like it's on demand so that I have some sort of structure to work with. But if, as I develop out the content, that changes, I'm super open to it. Like it just kind of needs to be what it kind of needs to be. And I don't want to get too hung up on the narrative of passive revenue being completely passive, because I don't believe revenue that's meant to be passive is ever actually passive. Like I'm sure all the drop shippers out there will disagree with me that it can be, but for something like this, for a course, I'm maintaining a little bit of a pragmatic approach to it in that if I make it on demand, there is an element of passivity in it once it's set up, but it should also have my attention and make sure that it's always really strong. My students are always really happy. I'm updating it as I need to and just set some realistic expectations to that. So for now, playing on as if it's on demand, but remaining flexible based on what the content tells me it needs. And the second thing I've been challenged by is how on earth do I get what I know and what I do out of my head and into a format that is valuable and makes sense to other people, particularly with this on-demand course content where live question and answer isn't possible. I have my ever-patient partner to thank for pushing me through that second challenge. This might be the simplest way in which to get your own unique process down on paper. So I was in the middle of a meltdown, of which I have had a few of, and he suggested I think through the content in a different way and to teach him how I do what I do. So essentially try and train him on how to do my job step by step to see if that helped get the content out of me and out of my brain in a way that could make sense. And geez, it bloody did, didn't it? Like he proved himself right. It really helped approaching it in that way. So we had a conversation that I approached as if he was completely new to the world of podcasting. and was trying to get himself to the stage where he could craft a podcast concept for his brand, his mythical brand. And it showed me all the things that he'd need to know. So all the things you'd need to know if you became one of my students. So as we talked it out, I had a stack of different coloured Post-its on hand with my trusted Sharpie to capture the thoughts and start to put them into some sort of order. I think I've said this before on a previous podcast, but I am the biggest fan of Post-its and coloured Post-its and just kind of getting them there and out there, which is ironic because I use a Remarkable because I don't want to write notes in anything other than a digital format. But when it comes to planning something, it's all about the Post-its. So firstly, going through this process, I realized there needs to be a base understanding of podcast genres, listening behaviors, platforms, etc. And so in this conversation, module 1, the podcast landscape, was born. So that module title went on to a purple Post-it, and beneath that, I placed a pink Post-it for each of the different areas or topics rather, e.g. podcast genres, listening behaviors, platforms that would need to be covered within the content of that module. And as I've mentioned before, there's a difference between crafting a brand-led podcast versus a straight creator-led podcast. There came module 2, the 101 of branded podcasts versus creator podcasts. And underneath that has topics like what do the best branded podcasts do? Hint, they look like creator podcasts. Ways to integrate a brand message, etc. Module 3 came out, which is all about understanding cultural insights and how they play a part in your concept creation, and so on, so on. I don't want to give it all away just yet or just like tell you all the content of my course because that would be a bit silly, and I'm still working it out, let's be real. But essentially through that process, I realized that there were 9 modules that need to be covered, and a stack of really valuable topics within that I can now flesh out. It's a lovely mosaic of Post-it notes that I can also move around and add to as this is developing. What I also did through this process was give some top-line consideration to where I might need to create a worksheet. So still thinking about, will my partner as this student or as this person who I was teaching my job to, like what would he need to be able to make this real? What kind of worksheet would help him make the learning style fit for him and kind of go into that next phase of taking it on? I considered what might be a straight lecture on video, for lack of a better word, sort of like a presentation or straight piece to camera, where I might need to create supporting presentations, even what I could offer as like a freebie piece to engage interest in the content. And now this has all been evolving the more time I've taken to think about it. I've just been adding to this mosaic and thinking, what else would Will need to know in order to do this? So that has become, what else would my student need to know in order to do this? And that's been one of my key learnings throughout this content mapping process or period of this journey, which is flexibility is key. After a few nights sleep or an inspiring something that I'll read, it's usually kind of unrelated, but makes its way back to thinking about my course, I'll get a new idea which will change things. So I would suggest not getting too hung up on a perfect step-by-step plan and having that ready to go before you move forward, as you might miss some gold. So look, same can be said for creating and producing a podcast, by the way. You can't be too rigid in your execution. I gave myself a lovely segue there into the final part of this episode, which is learnings. Another learning is to not get too excited about your content before considering these 4 things. This is not dissimilar to creating any product, be it a service offering, a course offering, a physical product, is to think about these things before you push forward. Who is my customer? In my case, it's a small business owner or brand team. So that's the first thing we need to think about before getting too excited about the content. Who is the customer? What do they know? Like, what do they know already? And in my case, it's safe to assume there's little to no knowledge on the podcast medium besides being a listener. Thirdly, what do they want to know? Like, what do they want to learn from you? In my case, it's how to think audience first and craft a podcast concept that allows for deep listener engagement and a natural brand integration that'll deliver a marketing result. So that's what people are going to expect out of this course. And damn straight, I need to give that to them. And finally, what would they like to have finished by the time they complete the course? So in my case, that would be a podcast plan that's ready to be taken into the production phase. So number 1, who's the customer? 2, what do they know? 3, what do they want to know? And finally, what would they like to have finished by the time they complete the course? Now, throughout this process, I'm just going to sidebar and kind of shift away from content for a little bit because I've been battling with how to price this thing. I don't have an answer on that yet. I started with a fairly affordable, arbitrary number, in which I realized was massively undervaluing myself, which is something I think a lot of us do as solopreneurs offering a skill set. But what I realized through this is when you're sharing your hard earned IP, it is a premium product. But you have to find that right product market fit and have really clear expectations on how many, who to, how often. I mean, we can't go crazy with thinking like all of a sudden we create an online course and we're going to be on a yacht, right? So I'm holding on this aspect right now and I'm just thinking about it a little more and in context to what I charge as a consultant and where I'll land on whether my course will be 100% on demand or if it will be dated and have aspects of live. I still have a lot of things to consider. So I'm not pushing forward with that yet, but that is some of the things that I'm considering and thinking about. So maybe that'll be helpful for you too. Now, through this process, I've also interviewed my guest for you for part 4 of this mini series, which is all on marketing. And I won't give too much of that away as it is a banger of a chat. But one point she really drove home was about market testing. So testing an online course idea at a top line with a group of ideal customers to hear what they need and to make sure that what I'm thinking of creating, what you're thinking of creating, is something they actually want before you create any content or put too much work in. Now, I have heard this advice before. I've heard it in multiple places. It is really important advice, but for some reason, I really haven't wanted to follow it, like at all. And this is probably because I'm someone who likes to really hustle and push forward on an idea at pace when it's something I'm really motivated by. For my human design friends, it's a manifesting generator thing. I just go. And also because I didn't really feel like I myself yet understood what I was creating because I couldn't see it yet, if that makes sense. I didn't quite have the map or the post-it mosaic that I now have. After that chat, I realized that there is never a bad time to think about testing your ideas, and mapping my course content in the way that I have just described to you is never going to be wasted work, regardless of if I choose to test now and it tests that nobody's interested in it, right? Because that's a fear, that's a scary thing, but it's never going to be wasted to test it. And it's never going to be wasted to have done the work if it goes nowhere. And particularly as I consult on this area, it's actually really helped me refine some other areas, get more definition to certain workshops and more definition to how I work with partners. But what I'm thinking now is that it may be the right time to get some feedback and have some conversations. I should probably pause and do that. And I'll be bringing the pricing challenge into those chats with small business owners to find out their thoughts and expectations on what they might expect to pay. So bringing it just back to that point on how do I price this thing, I think I'm going to need some opinion on that. So I am going to go in and test the market a little bit. So there may actually be a part 5 to this mini series, which I didn't plan, but as I really am sharing this journey with you as it's happening, if that's something that could be really valuable, let me know and I'd be happy to create it for you. Like I said up front, there is no perfectly correct opinion or a way to do any of this. Like everything else we do in small business, the journey is really where the growth happens. And if at the end of this, I have a body of work I'm proud of, that's a huge win. All of us, we just have to keep taking on information and ideas that resonate with us, leave the rest, and trust your instincts. Listener, I hope sharing all of this has been helpful for you and given you some confidence in how you might approach your own course if it's something that you're interested in. And if you do want to create your own course in your zone of genius, firstly, yes, why the bloody hell not? And let's do it together as I continue to share with you the journey of creating my online course on how to build a big branded podcast for your small business. And I really do hope bringing you behind the scenes like this helps to show you how you can work through the challenge to build your own thing too. Make sure to join me in the next episode, part 4, where I'm chatting with Mia Fileman, marketing expert and all-round legend of a human, about how on earth to get something like this out there with realistic expectations and doing it all without breaking the bank. She really is a fantastic marketer with a lot of really great insights. So I know you're going to love that episode. I would love to know your thoughts on what I'm creating here. The course, absolutely, but also this mini series. So make sure to slide into my DMs on IG at Unemployed and Afraid and or leave the pod a review. You know how much I love those. And if you're interested in this course that I'm building, head to goodsideofthebed.com.au. Check it out first of all, because it's my brand new website and I'd love your feedback. If you find a typo, I would be very, very grateful to hear about it. But drop me your email address while you're there to jump onto my mailing list and access it first. Now, I know asking someone to jump on a mailing list sounds like the most unattractive thing on the planet. Like, do any of us want to be on more mailing lists? But I promise you that what I'm going to be sharing with you will be insightful and it won't be an email bomb. And hopefully you really enjoy being connected with me. So in that vein, if you want to help me create exactly what you need by jumping on a 15-minute call together about branded podcast course creation, well, you know where to find me. I will see you, or rather you'll hear me, and I'll be grateful to be in your ears next episode. You absolute business building legend, you. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.